Before we dive into the story, if you love high-stakes sci-fi and stories where humanity stands toe-to-toe with the universe's deadliest creatures, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps more people discover these narratives and keeps the stories coming. Now let's begin. The wind screamed through the fractured tree-line like a warning no one could heed. Captain Elias Vance crouched low against the ruined outcrop, his visor reflecting the dim flare of distant fires. Vera 7 had once been a lush research colony, but now it reeked of burnt soil and fear. His squad moved silently behind him, 4 men and 1 woman, trained killers who were trying very hard not to look terrified. The briefing had been clear. No survivors had made contact in 72 hours. All signals had died the same night the sensor grid picked up movement in the tree-line. Every soldier on the frontier knew what that meant. The Draxel. Apex predators. A single one could tear a mech suit open like a tin can. And somewhere in that black forest ahead, something was moving. Vance raised his fist, signaling halt. Private Keegan muttered under his breath, too low for the comms to pick up but loud enough for the tension to thicken. Vance ignored it. Fear was the enemy's sharpest weapon out here. The squad's helmets pulsed faint green against the mist as their scanners swept the dark. Nothing. That was worse than a warning. He tapped the interface at his wrist, bringing up the holomap. A red triangle blinked on the north quadrant, an abandoned settlement grid. That was their target. A faint flicker of life signs had been registered there hours ago. If there was anyone left to save, that was the place. Keegan. Marlowe. Sweep left. I'll take point with Soren. Patel, cover our 6, Vance ordered. His voice was steady, clipped. The kind of voice that didn't give away the churn underneath. The forest seemed to close around them as they advanced. Ash-laced leaves crunched beneath their boots. The sky hung heavy, a dull bruise of clouds swallowing the stars. A faint drip of water echoed like footsteps that weren't theirs. Soren tilted his rifle, scanning upward, but Vance already knew it wasn't above them. It was watching. The scent hit first, an iron tang that didn't belong to the forest. Blood. He crouched beside a fallen fence and found deep claw marks gouged into the plasteel. A colonist badge dangled from a splintered pole, swaying in the cold wind. Whatever had done this hadn't just killed. It had claimed. Keegan's voice cracked through the comms. Cap, got something, North Ridge movement. Big. Real big. Eyes up, Vance hissed. The squad tightened formation as they moved toward the settlement's shell. A few gutted buildings loomed like hollow bones. Shadows rippled between the walls. Then it stepped into view. The Draxel was everything the briefings had promised and worse. Its silhouette towered over the broken ground, armored hide modeled in deep obsidian, muscles like corded steel beneath. Its breathing was low and deliberate, each exhale clouding the air. But what froze Vance wasn't its size, it was its stillness. It wasn't attacking. It was studying them. Target acquired. Open fire? Patel's finger hovered over the trigger. Hold. The word left Vance before he could think. His team hesitated, confused, but they obeyed. The creature tilted its head slightly. Not a snarl. Not a charge. A gesture that, disturbingly, looked almost curious. Then a sound rose behind them, a low rumble of engines. Vance whipped around. From the east, a mercenary skimmer burst into view, its guns glowing. Rogue human scavengers, drawn here by chaos like flies to a carcass. Contact. Soren barked, opening fire. The night exploded. Tracer rounds streaked across the black, slamming into broken walls. The Draxel let out a bellow that shook the leaves from the trees. For a moment, Vance thought they were dead. Then it moved, not toward them but toward the mercenaries. It hit the first gunner like a shadow with teeth. The skimmer flipped sideways, smoke billowing. Vance and his squad fired in tandem, dropping the remaining mercs before they could regroup. Soren cursed as shrapnel tore across his arm, but they held the line. Through it all, the Draxel was a storm, terrifying, controlled, and very, very aware of where Vance's squad was. The last merc went down screaming. The forest fell into silence again, thick and heavy. The Draxel stood amidst the wreckage, chest rising and falling. Its claws dripped crimson. But it didn't turn on them. It looked at Vance directly, golden eyes catching the last flickers of firelight. Keegan raised his rifle again. Captain, it's right there. I know, Vance murmured. The predator lowered its head, not in submission, not in fear. An acknowledgement. Something primal moved between them, a wordless recognition of strength meeting strength. Then it straightened, gave a low rumbling growl that felt more like a warning to the forest than to them, and melted back into the dark. The squad stood frozen in its wake. Soren finally let out a shaky laugh. "We should be dead." Vance didn't answer. He stared into the tree-line where the creature had vanished, pulse hammering beneath his armor. He'd seen predators. He'd fought monsters. But nothing about that thing had felt mindless. It had chosen not to kill them. The sound of distant thunder rolled over the valley. Patel kicked at the smoking wreckage of the skimmer. "Command's gonna want a report." "Yeah," Vance said quietly. "But I don't think they're gonna believe it." Somewhere in the Black Forest, a predator bled, breathing, remembering. And for reasons he couldn't yet name, Elias Vance already knew their paths would cross again. The night swallowed the last embers of battle, but something older than war had just begun to stir. The med bay lights hummed low, a sterile halo around the battered squad. Vance sat at the edge of the cot, flexing his bandaged hand, his thoughts louder than the quiet room. The official debrief had lasted 39 minutes. Command had listened. Command had nodded. And then Command had called his story, a stress-induced misread of combat behavior. "Misread?" he muttered. The word tasted like ash. Across from him, Soren winced as a medic sealed the gash along his arm. "They don't want to hear that the Draxel didn't rip us apart. Doesn't fit their favorite bedtime monster story." Vance didn't respond. He'd replayed the moment a dozen times in his head. The predator, motionless in the chaos, eyes steady and intelligent. If it had wanted to kill them, no one would have made it out. Yet it had left them breathing. That was no accident. Keegan leaned against the doorway, jittery, helmet under one arm. "Command already drafted a strike order. They're sending a gunship to burn the forest by dawn. No witnesses, no problems." Vance rose to his feet. The bandages tugged against his knuckles, but it didn't matter. Something in his chest twisted hard at the thought of fire rolling over the tree-line. "We're not torching something we don't understand." Keegan stared at him like he'd just spoken another language. "Captain, it's a Draxel. You don't understand those? You survive them if you're lucky." "Yeah, well, we were more than lucky tonight." Vance's voice was a quiet blade. "And luck doesn't hold back a predator like that." The room stilled. Soren's gaze dropped, but no one argued. Vance felt the weight of command settle on him like wet iron. Order said burn it down. Instinct said go back. He'd learned long ago which voice kept men alive. Hours later, the base lights dimmed to night cycle. Patrols thinned. Vance moved through the service corridors like a shadow, gear stripped down to the essentials. No squad. No witnesses. Just him and the question clawing at the edge of his mind. The shuttle bay was quiet, save for the low thrum of engines and the taste of ionized air. He requisitioned a scout skimmer under his personal clearance. No one dared stop the captain who'd come back from a Draxel encounter alive. The canopy hissed shut, and the world blurred into dark forest and low cloud. The burn perimeter was already marked on the tactical display, a red circle creeping closer to the last coordinates. He had maybe an hour before the gunship scorched everything. Branches tore at the skimmer's hull as he slid beneath the canopy. The air smelled wet, thick with rain and blood. He cut the engines half a click out, letting the quiet swallow him whole. The forest didn't feel empty. It felt like it was watching. He followed the trail he'd memorized earlier, every step calculated. The crash site of the mercenary skimmer still smoldered faintly, black smoke threading upward. Vultures would have come by now, if they weren't terrified of what still lurked here. And then he saw it. The name slipped into his mind uninvited, as if it had been waiting for him. The Draxel lay slumped against a shattered support beam, its chest rising shallowly. One wing, if you could call the heavy armored fins along its spine that was torn open. Its claws twitched weakly, but its eyes burned with feral clarity the moment they found him. The weight of that gaze hit like a punch, but Vance didn't raise his rifle. Slowly he let it hang low at his side. He stepped closer. "I'm not here to finish it," he said quietly, though the creature couldn't understand his words. Maybe tone was enough. Rook shifted, muscles tightening, but it didn't strike. Its breathing rasped like gravel dragged across stone. Up close, it wasn't just terrifying, it was wounded, bleeding badly, holding itself together through sheer will. The gash along its flank was wide and ugly. He knelt 2 meters away, keeping his movements deliberate. From his belt pouch he pulled a press seal medpack. The sound of the strip tearing seemed absurdly loud in the silence. "This is insane," he breathed. "Absolutely insane." Rook growled low, the sound vibrating through the earth, but there was no lunge. No death strike. Only watching. Measuring. Vance slid forward, inch by inch, until he was close enough to feel the heat rolling off its body. He could see the individual plates of its hide, each one scarred like battle trophies. When he pressed the first patch of med foam against the wound, Rook flinched but didn't tear him apart. Minutes stretched like wire. The forest held its breath. The foam hissed and hardened, sealing flesh no human hands had ever dared to touch. Vance's heartbeat pounded in his throat. When it was done, Rook's breathing steadied, not healed but stabilized. The creature's eyes locked onto him again, something sharp and searching behind the gold. Vance didn't see hunger there. He saw assessment. Recognition. "You could have killed me," Vance whispered. "But you didn't." A low chuff answered, not a growl this time. Something closer to an acknowledgement. Vance sat back on his heels, half expecting the strike to come anyway. It didn't. He didn't know how long they stayed like that, soldier and predator, surrounded by the hush of the forest. But something had shifted. He felt it in the way Rook's shoulders lowered, in the way the air stopped crackling with the promise of violence. Above them, thunder rolled. Firestorm engines rumbled faintly in the distance. The gunship, right on schedule. Vance rose to his feet. "They're coming to burn this place down," he said. "You either stay here and die or—" The rest of the sentence caught in his throat. It was madness to think it would understand. But Rook moved. Slowly, painfully, it pushed itself upright, towering over him once more. The forest canopy seemed to shrink in its presence. For a heartbeat they just stood there, facing each other, two apex predators from different worlds. Then Rook stepped forward, closing the space between them with deliberate slowness, and lowered its massive head. Vance didn't flinch. The beast inhaled once, a deep, resonant sound that rattled through his chest, then shifted its stance, not crouched to strike but angled, aligned. Pack alignment. He'd seen wolves do it in the old Earth vids. A sign of trust, or a declaration of who it had chosen to follow. The distant engines grew louder. The gunship was coming. Vance realized with a sharp clarity that he wasn't leaving this forest alone. Rook had chosen. He exhaled slowly, one hand tightening on his rifle, not to use it, but to steady himself against the weight of what that choice meant. The storm was coming, and for the first time in years, Vance didn't feel alone walking into it. The docking clamps locked with a dull metallic shudder, and Vance felt the weight of the orbital station settle like a collar around his throat. The air inside smelled faintly of recycled ozone and diplomacy, sharp, sterile, and false. Beyond the security gate, the great chamber of the Galactic Council glimmered with mirrored walls and high-arched light panels that pretended to be a sky. It was a place designed to remind visitors who held power. Rook moved beside him in a slow, deliberate gait, its heavy steps echoing down the corridor like quiet thunder. Shackles circled its wrists, not because they could hold it, but because the council had insisted on appearances. Vance hadn't missed the way the soldiers along the corridor flinched back as the Draxo passed, their rifles trembling slightly even on safe mode. It wasn't fear of a prisoner. It was fear of something they'd never imagined walking through these halls alive. Ambassador Kale met him at the final checkpoint. He was lean, sharp-jawed, every inch of him wrapped in the clean precision of someone who'd spent his life turning words into weapons. "Captain Vance," Kale said softly, stepping in close. "You've done something either brilliant or catastrophic." "Usually both," Vance replied. His voice was low but steady. Kale's gaze flicked to Rook, whose golden eyes burned through the low light. "This thing walking in here, do you understand what kind of storm you've set off?" "It saved my life," Vance said. "And I saved its. That's not a storm. That's a fact." Kale's lips thinned, not quite a smile. "The council doesn't care about facts. They care about control. And you just dragged a living myth into their house." The chamber opened like a wound, circular and vast, with tiers of alien delegates rising in spiraling rows. Some were humanoid, some amorphous, some little more than pulsing light within containment fields. And at the center, elevated on a dais of obsidian glass, sat the council core, a triad of elder representatives who had outlived empires. The murmurs began before Vance even crossed the threshold. Rook's height forced its head to dip slightly beneath the arch, but its presence filled the room like a storm front. Weapons didn't come out, but the tension was a living thing. Counselor Trell, all translucent skin and silver thread tendrils, spoke first. Captain Elias Vance of the Terran Expansion Forces, explain why an apex predator of the Draxel kind is standing before this assembly instead of lying dead on the forest floor where it belongs. Vance met the alien's gaze without flinching. Because it chose not to kill. Because it fought beside us against human mercenaries. Because it understood what we were. And because I made the same choice. The chamber rippled with low noise, disbelief, disgust, curiosity. A dozen alien tongues clashed at once. Kale didn't move, but Vance felt his silent warning like a blade against his spine. Careful. They're not listening for truth. They're listening for weakness. A new voice, smooth and cold, rose from the opposite tier. Draxel don't choose allies. They choose prey. It belonged to Counselor Merrick's, an old political rival of humanity. Your story reeks of human arrogance. You think a beast sparing you is proof of intelligence. It's not arrogance, Vance said evenly. It's observation. If it wanted me dead, I wouldn't be standing here. Rook shifted slightly, its golden eyes cutting across the chamber like a blade. Its low growl was not loud, but every living thing in the room felt it. Merrick's faltered mid-breath. Trell tapped a clawed finger against the table. The Council has declared the Draxel species too dangerous to be integrated into any interstellar agreements. They remain an apex threat. If this creature is alive, it is in violation of centuries-old containment protocols. Kale finally stepped forward, his voice slicing through the rising chorus. Then perhaps it's time those protocols were re-evaluated. Unless the Council prefers fear over progress. The uproar sharpened. Vance kept his eyes on Rook, on the way the creature stood still but alert, predator in unfamiliar terrain, trusting no one but him. It didn't need to understand the language to feel the hostility. The Corps spoke then, their voice layered, ancient. The Council will vote. The options are simple, capture for study or termination. Vance's pulse slammed against his ribs. Termination. The word tasted like old wars and burned bones. Kale's voice tightened. And if humanity refuses that vote? Then humanity will face sanction, Trell said smoothly. You shelter a weapon, you become one. The soldiers around the perimeter straightened. This wasn't a hearing. It was a noose tightening around their throats. Vance stepped forward, the chains on Rook rattling softly. If you do this, you'll ignite something you can't control. This creature, this being, chose not to slaughter us. That means something. It means your centuries-old story about monsters isn't the whole truth anymore. Merrick sneered. A story written in blood does not change because a soldier felt special. Rook's growl deepened. The lights dimmed slightly as if the air itself bent beneath the sound. Vance lifted a hand, palm open, not commanding, just present. Rook stilled. That single moment, the obedience of something the galaxy feared, hung in the chamber like a blade. Kale seized it. You all saw that, he said, his voice sharp and precise. Control, restraint, understanding. How many apex predators in your histories would have stayed their claws? This isn't an anomaly. It's the first crack in a wall you've spent centuries hiding behind. The Corps leaned back in silent calculation. Merrick's hissed something in his own tongue. The vote was inevitable now. Vance knew it. But the outcome no longer belonged to whispers in dark rooms. They sealed the chamber doors as the delegates cast their signals, lights flaring across the tiers like cold stars. Vance's hand brushed the chain on Rook's arm, steadying neither the beast nor himself, but something between. He felt Rook's gaze on him, a silent weight that said, whatever they decide, we fight together. The final light pulsed at the top of the chamber. The Council, the Corps announced, votes for capture. The creature will be transferred to the high containment facility. Further evaluation will determine its fate. Humanity will cooperate fully. A quiet exhale rippled through the assembly, a collective relief that sounded too much like satisfaction. Kale stepped close, his whisper just for Vance. They think they've leashed it. They have no idea what they've just brought inside their own walls. Rook straightened as the guards approached. No roar, no panic. Just quiet defiance. Its gaze stayed locked on Vance. A bond not spoken but forged in blood and fire. As the council chamber emptied, Vance's hands tightened into fists. The galaxy had just placed its most feared predator in a cage. But Vance had seen the way Rook looked at him, not as prey, not as a prisoner, as pack. And the last thing the council understood was what a predator did when its pack was threatened. The alarm started low, a single, distant pulse like a heart stuttering in the dark. Vance had been sitting on the cold observation deck, staring through reinforced glass at the containment chamber below. Rook lay coiled in the center of the pen, shackled, its breathing steady but awake. It hadn't slept once since they brought it here. Neither had he. The second alarm hit sharper. Red lights flushed down the corridor, a rolling tide of warning. The guards outside barked orders into their comms, their polished discipline cracking beneath the noise. Vance stood slowly, his instincts moving before his thoughts did. Something was wrong. The station's alarms weren't built for drills. Kale appeared in the doorway, half buckled into a security vest, hair out of place for the first time since Vance had met him. "Someone just bypassed the council security grid," he said breathlessly. "Elite kill team. Not council-sanctioned. Mercenaries. The same kind that attacked the colony." The chill that went through Vance wasn't fear, it was recognition. This wasn't politics anymore. This was the quiet, sharp language of people who killed to erase stories before they spread. "How long?" Vance asked. 3 minutes, Kale said. "Maybe less. Their target isn't the council. It's your friend down there." Rook lifted its head as the blast doors shuttered. It didn't roar. It simply watched, its golden eyes narrowing with something that looked uncomfortably close to knowing. The first explosion ripped through the security wing. Panels burst from the ceiling, sparks raining down like burning snow. Vance slammed a hand against the override panel and punched in his access code. The door to the chamber hissed. "Are you insane?" Kale hissed. "They'll kill it. And if they kill it here, the council will bury the truth forever," Vance said. Inside, the containment field flickered out. Rook rose to its full height, chains rattling like an ancient warning. Vance stepped forward. "Easy," he said softly. "They're coming for you. But not without going through me." The wall to the west ruptured. Figures poured through the smoke, black armor, fluid movements, silencers built for precision, not chaos. Mercenaries. Killers. Their rifles lifted in unison. Vance dropped behind the nearest barricade as the room erupted. Energy bolts screamed through the air, searing the walls. Rook moved like a storm unchained, shattering its restraints with a single convulsion. One mercenary fired a clean shot at its chest. It didn't matter. Rook closed the distance faster than eyes could follow. Metal crumpled. The man didn't scream. Kale took cover beside Vance, pulling a sidearm with a grimace that said he didn't like how outmatched they were. "You realize you're defending the galaxy's oldest nightmare, right?" "I'm defending the only thing in this room that didn't lie to me," Vance snapped. The mercenaries fanned out, coordinated, efficient. But they hadn't planned for an apex predator moving with purpose. Rook didn't attack blindly. It moved to protect. Twice, Vance saw it pivot between him and incoming fire, taking hits to its armored hide rather than letting them reach him. Kale cursed under his breath. "That's not instinct. That's strategy." "They called it a monster," Vance said. "Looks more human than half the people upstairs." Another detonation. The far wall gave way, and the mercenaries surged in a last desperate wave. Rook met them head-on, but the fight wasn't clean. There were too many. One round found its mark, a white-hot plasma bolt that burned across Rook's flank. The creature staggered, snarling. Vance was already moving. He broke cover, grabbed a fallen rifle, and fired into the advancing line. He didn't care about protocol. The air filled with the tang of scorched metal and blood. A mercenary lunged at him, blade flashing, but Vance slammed the butt of the rifle into his helmet and pulled the trigger point blank. When the smoke cleared, 3 mercenaries remained. Rook loomed over them, wounded but unbroken, chest heaving. One tried to back away. Rook didn't strike. It simply leaned forward, a sound building deep in its chest, low and resonant, vibrating the floor. The man froze, dropped his weapon, and bolted. The last 2 weren't as wise. Rook's claws flashed once. The silence that followed was final. Above, the security lights shifted. The council would be watching everything by now. Every move, every choice. Vance lowered the rifle and looked up at the cameras, knowing there was no taking it back. Kale stepped closer, breathing hard. "Do you have any idea what this looks like?" You just sided with a Draxel against council-sanctioned security. Not security, Vance said, voice low. Assassins. Someone didn't want this thing to exist past tonight. Kale's jaw tightened. Then we've just made enemies that don't hold elections. Rook limped toward them, its wound seared and smoking. Vance moved instinctively, pressing his palm against its armored flank. He could feel the tremor of pain, the shuddering breath. But Rook didn't flinch away. It leaned into the touch. The station intercom cracked to life. A clipped council voice echoed overhead. Captain Vance. Stand down. You will be detained for obstruction of a security operation. The creature will be terminated immediately. They're going to finish what the Merc started, Kale said. Not while I'm breathing, Vance answered. Through the reinforced viewport, soldiers poured into the adjoining hallways, forming containment rings around the deck. The entire station was moving like a single machine built for one outcome: Rook's death. The creature straightened despite the blood seeping through its side. It faced the corridor, head lowered, muscles coiled. Vance recognized the stance. Not prey. Not prisoner. Predator ready to defend its pack. He looked at Kale. We don't run. Kale swallowed once, then nodded. Then we make them regret underestimating us. The first breach team advanced. Vance and Rook stood shoulder to shoulder. One man and one apex predator, facing down a galaxy's worth of fear and policy. Outside, the soldiers raised their weapons. Inside, the air thrummed with something sharp and electric. When the doors finally blew, the station shook with the sound of the storm they had just unleashed together. The air was thin, sharp, almost electric. The Galactic Summit's war chamber had never felt so alive. Flags of dozens of civilizations shimmered against the light of twin suns, each banner trembling as if the very fabric of the universe knew what was coming. Cade stood at the front of the human delegation, not in the shadow of any superior officer, not as a soldier taking orders, but as the man the Apex itself had chosen. The once doubted scout was now humanity's voice at the edge of everything. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him, alien, human, predator, and he didn't blink. The Apex crouched behind him, massive shoulders relaxed, head tilted slightly, but its amber eyes were cold with calculation. It had taken down fleets without hesitation. It had hunted across stars without mercy. Yet now it waited, for him. Every breath the creature took seemed to thrum through the floor, a steady, controlled rhythm that mirrored Cade's pulse. The galaxy had seen monsters before, but never one that had chosen a pack. And that pack was human. Proceed, the Arbiter's voice boomed from the raised dais. A creature of glass and bone, it towered with regal indifference. The Council will hear humanity's claim. Cade stepped forward. His boots rang against the polished obsidian floor. Behind him, Commander Reyes shifted slightly, jaw clenched, the soldier in him refusing to show the storm within. Dr. Malik's fingers tapped nervously at the tablet, the physicist still not fully accepting how far this had spiraled. It wasn't just about a predator anymore. It was about who controlled the future. Cade raised his chin. The Apex is not a weapon. It is not a slave. It shows us. That means something. A ripple moved through the chamber like wind through a field. Some laughed, short, bitter sounds from reptilian throats. Others hissed. One delegate from the Serati Syndicate slammed its tail in protest. And still Cade didn't waver. The Arbiter leaned forward. Do you presume to speak for a predator that has hunted our kind for centuries? Cade didn't glance back, but he felt the Apex's presence like gravity itself. No, he said slowly, carefully, I'm not speaking for it. I'm speaking with it. The Apex moved then just one step. The floor trembled as if the universe itself acknowledged the moment. Several delegates recoiled instinctively. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of blade-like teeth, but instead of a snarl, it released a low, resonant growl that seemed to shape itself into intention rather than speech. Malik's voice was low, translating. It says, "This is my pack. Harm them and you face extinction." The word struck harder than any weapon. The chamber fell silent, and in that silence, humanity became something more than just another young species. They became the center of the storm. But the Arbiter wasn't finished. And what happens, human, it said with quiet venom, when your predator decides it no longer needs its pack? Reyes stepped forward then, the commander who had once called Cade reckless, dangerous, wrong. His voice was steel. Then we'll face it. Not as prey. as a pack. That simple statement sent a tremor through the gathered species. Unity had always been their weakness, their fracture point. But here were humans standing with the very beast they'd once feared, refusing to bow. The apex slowly lowered its head beside Cade, its massive form half shadowing him, half merging with him. Predator and man standing as one. Malik's heart hammered as he watched. He had spent a lifetime studying power, but this was something else. Not power taken. Power shared. The Arbiter lifted a translucent hand. Then prove it. A hologram flared in the air. Fleet signatures. Millions of them. The Council's enemies, rogue factions, were massing near the Orion Rift. A storm that could end countless worlds. We offer you command, the Arbiter said. If humanity and its creature can turn the tide, your claim stands. Fail and your pack dies first. Cade didn't hesitate. We accept. Rhea's head snapped toward him. Cade. He met the commander's eyes, the same man who had once doubted him. We've been underestimated our entire history, Reyes. It's time we return the favor. The apex bared its teeth, not in aggression but in something eerily like a grin. Hours later, the stars over Orion Rift burned with war. Human vessels cut through the void in tight formation. Behind them, the apex leapt into the black, its body built for killing in vacuum, tearing through enemy craft like paper. The beast didn't fight for dominance now, it fought for its pack. Inside the command ship, Cade issued orders with precision, his voice calm even as the universe split open outside. Reyes commanded flanking units. Malik rerouted power through gravitational slingshot arrays, making human ships move like predators themselves. They weren't prey anymore. When the apex collided with the enemy flagship, the impact sent a shockwave that rippled through space. It roared, a sound that was felt, not heard. The enemy fleet faltered. Predators don't follow prey into battle. They follow other predators. Humanity's fleet surged forward. For the first time in galactic history, the apex predator wasn't the enemy. It was the banner under which humans marched. The battle ended not with the roar of victory but with silence. A silence that belonged to those who had earned their place. Cade floated in the observation deck, watching debris drift like ash in water. The apex floated beside the ship, glowing faintly from its own energy, a dark god watching over its chosen. Reyes joined him, arms crossed. You realize what this means, right? Cade nodded slowly. Yeah. We're not just part of the galaxy anymore. We're at the center of it. Malik entered, breathless, a grin breaking through his usual reserve. The council just voted. Full sovereignty. And, he held up the datapad, voice trembling. They want us to lead the defense coalition. Cade looked out at the beast that had once terrified entire star systems. It blinked slowly, then angled its head toward him. A silent acknowledgement between hunter and human. The galaxy had tried to tame the predator. Humanity had done something far more dangerous. They'd earned its loyalty. Cade exhaled, his reflection mirrored in the void. Then let's show them what a pack can do. And as the apex roared into the void once more, the stars themselves seemed to lean in, listening. The predator had chosen its pack, and the universe would never be the same again.